Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mike on the Mike Show. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We have a very exciting show tonight. We are talking about real estate, continuing our chat with real estate, and one of the big parts of real estate is the closing process. So you can't buy a home without dealing with an attorney and going through the whole legal procedure. And we are very fortunate tonight to have a highly regarded professional, an expert in the real estate closing process, Mr. Ajay Gupta?
Yes, that's right. Ajay Gupta.
Sorry. Hey, Ajay, well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us on the show tonight. All right, how are you doing? You doing all right?
Yeah, doing great.
Great. Okay. AJ, well, let's just start off. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got started, how you got introduced to the real estate law, any services you offer, just anything you want to just talk about, just to kind of introduce yourself.
Well, let's see. I graduated in '97. Did some land development actually in Michigan. Went to law school. I guess that was 2002, graduated in '05, started practicing in real estate title work, opened my practice in '08, and that was right around the time of the foreclosure crisis, as most people know. So went through that whole experience, and now it seems like we're working our way out of that, and we're seeing a lot more transactional work and disputes that arise out of transactions. Currently, I'm practicing in California, so in San Diego counties, and that's pretty much our practice is real estate and civil litigation.
Okay, great. Now, what was there anything that really got you wanting to be in the real estate law industry, or something maybe happened in your life that you'd say, hey, I want to be an attorney, like anything unique or something that made you, what do you want to be when you grow up kind of stories?
I don't know if it's anything specific. My dad was a real estate developer, and so I watched him go through a number of issues with real estate as he went through that process, less related to real estate and more related to partnerships and corporate formations and formalities and dealing with investors and things like that. So I was always exposed to those types of issues. As far as going to law school, I think when I've always thought I'd wind up going to law school at some point in time. I just didn't know when. And obviously, once I was in law school, real estate seemed like a natural transition given my history before going there.
Sure, yeah, that definitely makes sense if you kind of grew up with that and your father and whatnot. So yeah, that definitely makes perfect sense. Oh, good. I'm glad you're definitely doing something you like and enjoy, and definitely helping people out, because this is a process that everyone needs a lawyer at some point in their life, buying a home, especially like we're talking about tonight. So yeah, it's definitely. So let me ask you this. Now, if someone were looking for a real estate attorney for their home closing, now how would they go about choosing one best suited for their needs? Like, are there any things in particular they should look for, anything they should expect in their search?
Well, I mean, in California, I would say about 90% of residential real estate transactions actually happen without an attorney. I know that's different
Really?
on the East Coast, where I think, at least in New York, I know it's mandatory that there be an attorney that represents the buyer or seller at closing. So that's actually something that's very unique, I think, to California. My experience in Michigan is most people actually purchase homes without attorneys as well. So at the onset, you probably need to figure out whether you need an attorney or not. I will say that it's useful to have an attorney. And there's a number of reasons why, but I think when people engage in this home buying process, they engage a realtor, a lender, a title company, but they engage a number of parties that all have vested interests in closing a transaction. Almost none of the people that you talk to, other than an attorney, will get paid on a deal unless it closes. And so they kind of surround both buyers and sellers with people that are really excited about buying and selling property because their financial interests are consistent with that. And again, that's more specific to California, but that's been my experience wherever I've went.
Sure.
A lawyer really is useful to kind of put the brakes on that process and say, what are we really trying to do here? What's your goals? Is this purchase consistent with those goals? The lawyer's role really isn't to evaluate the market and to see if you're buying it well, or even not necessarily to evaluate the terms of your loan, but really it's to evaluate whether or not the purchase of the property is going to help you get to where you need to be or want to be, and is it what you think you're buying? So there's all sorts of situations where people think they're getting one thing, and oftentimes it winds up being something completely different. And that can be obviously a nightmare scenario for any home buyer.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure a lot of people have been burned by numerous things in the past, and if they didn't have an attorney lined up or in one of those states where it's not required, then they're definitely, I'm sure, kicking themselves for not going with an attorney. Now, for the states that do not have an attorney, I'm just curious. Do you know how they can close the loan without the attorney, or is it?
What? Escrow drafts all the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So even with an attorney, the escrow is the one that drafts all the paperwork, and the attorney just reviews the paperwork to make sure it's consistent with what the home purchasers want. But I would say oftentimes by that point in the game, it's usually too late to engage an attorney in anything substantively meaningful. Probably the best time to engage an attorney is going to be either prior to executing a sales contract, or if you don't do that, then prior to almost immediately thereafter, so that they can assist you with the due diligence process. Because that's really where the lion's share of action can take place. If you sign a sales contract, you're committing to do certain things within a very, very short period of time. If you let your due diligence period expire and the contingencies get waived, then you're committing to go through escrow under the terms of the sales agreement. So if you don't engage an attorney early in that process, then you can find yourself, or you actually will find yourself, committed to close escrow, even if the escrow documents, or even if the attorney finds something that's inconsistent with what your goals are. The escrow documents can be perfectly fine, but if you've already signed a sales contract, you may have already gone too far, and it may be something that you can't back out of.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like having an attorney is going to be the more safe route, I guess, especially for those who are not too familiar with the process. So I guess basically, unless you have a lot of experience in closing a lot of loans or buying a lot of homes, then you should probably get with an expert attorney like yourself before.
Tough, especially it's almost a cultural shift.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, because they're so used to thinking about transactions in the form of those closing. Like, what is the amount that I owe at closing? And they're not used to really paying a lot of fees for basic due diligence. Okay, I know I need to do. I may have to pay for an appraisal. I may have to pay for an inspector, and those are normal fees that they associate. At least again, culturally out in California, they don't tack lawyers into that calculation. Well, it's going to cost me It's going to cost me $500 to $1,000 to have an attorney evaluate the sales contract, look through at least some preliminary due diligence documents. If there's an HOA, I would definitely recommend that any person engage an attorney if there's any HOA involved. If you're buying into a condominium, which is actually very common out here, you need to understand what are the issues with that condominium association, what are the rights, what are the problems that people are having. So those are things that people need to engage in, but it is a mindset shift that people, quite frankly, don't need to engage in if they're going to think about going through an attorney. in a state where they're not used to paying attorney's fees, because attorneys typically are looked at as being somebody that are not necessary to the transaction and overhead expense. And your realtors aren't going to encourage it, because all an attorney can say is don't do this. So it's
and
not.
the realtor doesn't get his commission.
Right, exactly. So you're gonna see that more and more. We are seeing people engage us earlier in the process. I literally this was actually on the 4th of July. A guy called me up and he said, "Hey, I've got some papers. Do you mind if I drop in?" And I made some time with him in the morning, and we went through his documents, and I looked at it, and it was a very unusual situation. He thought he was buying a condominium, which, for your listeners who really, a condominium is a purchase of an individual unit in a complex. So you have all the rights entitled to that individual unit, and the complex is maintained by the homeowners association. And I looked at the documentation, and this is just fresh in my mind, and I looked at it, and it was titled, it was just a 2-unit condominium. It was two pieces of property on two homes on a land that they had divided via what's called a condominium map, or supposedly divided via a condominium map. And when we looked at the documentation, it had been titled as what's known as a tenancy in common. I know this is a little technical, but essentially, instead of having an individual right to the piece of property that the guy thought he was buying, he actually had a 50% interest in the entire land, with contractual rights to the unit that he thought he was buying. And that has all sorts of implications. It has implications in financing. It has implications in foreclosure. It has implications for how if somebody gets a judgment lien or has a lien put on the property, because or even in the sale of the property. So when you're purchasing as a tenancy in common, that's very different than purchasing a condominium, which is what this guy thought he was buying. I don't actually know what's going to happen with respect to that transaction, but I'm almost certain that it's not going to close, and my client's going to be better off because of that.
Well, so that is definitely a good reason that he decided to go with an attorney to review everything beforehand, and so it wouldn't come back to haunt him in the future, of course, if something did go terribly wrong and he did go through with it. So definitely a very excellent reason why you do need an attorney to really make sure that you don't make any kind of big mistake like that could end up costing you a lot of money, right? In the long run.
That was a really unusual situation. I mean,
right.
That's not an everyday situation, but
sure.
And there's a good chance that when he went to get his financing, that may have been caught later on or something of that nature. And I don't mean to say that everybody should be leery of condominiums, but there are other things that when you're looking at condominium documents and trying to understand what the myriad of things are. If you don't have experience with it, then it does make sense to get somebody that does on board.
Yeah, definitely. Now, just getting into the whole problem issue here, we were just talking about it. Are there any other common problems that you've seen people face when they're wanting to purchase a home?
Purchasing or selling a home, and this again speaks to California law, but whenever you're purchasing or selling a home, one of the most commonly litigated things that we see out here is proper disclosure. So in California, sellers have a duty to disclose any material defect with properties that would affect a reasonably prudent buyer's decision to purchase the property. And so what winds up happening is people buy the home, and suddenly they discover a leak, and then they call a contractor in, and the contractor, and this has happened a couple occasions, where the contractor says, "Hey, I was at this property 3 years ago when we looked at this problem, and here's the write-up for it." And it turns out that the buyer knew about it. And this is a problem for buyers, obviously, because then they wind up stuck with a property. And there's very little that you can do to avoid that from a buyer's side, but oftentimes from the seller's side too. I mean, they need to make sure that they're disclosing everything about the property when they go to sell it. And if they don't do that, then it opens them up to a tremendous amount of liability and just the frustration of litigation. So that's always something that people need to be wary of.
Yeah, good points there for sure. Yeah, it definitely sounds like, just from what you've been telling me, that if you don't have an attorney, like, you are really, you're kind of asking for trouble. I mean, because you just don't know what you're getting into, if you're not familiar with the whole process. So definitely, for those of you out there who are contemplating on going with a lawyer or not, I would suggest, based on what AJ's been telling us, that you probably should spare the extra expense and go with a lawyer, just so you're not dealt with any forthcomings in the future and things you may not have been aware of yourself. So unless you're an expert, bought a lot of homes in the past yourself, and never really had to worry about an attorney, then fine. But if you're new to the home buying process, I would definitely suggest, based on what I've been hearing from what AJ's been sharing with us, that an attorney is definitely the safest bet to make sure that you are getting exactly what you're paying for and what you signed up for and all the disclosures and all that. Now, AJ, just real quick, I know we're getting short on time here, but can you just run us through just a typical loan closing process, just for a standard closing, regular home or a condo? What is the process like? Is there a certain time period it typically takes, or what can you share with us about that?
I mean, most closings they try and get done in 30 days. California, there's again something called a time is of the essence clause, which most standard contracts have, although people rarely listen to them. But basically, what that means is that your closing dates are certain. So if you don't close on a certain date, then you're officially in breach of contract. But I'm not going to go into the implications of that, but most standard agreements here, they have about a 17-day, what's called due diligence period, which isn't a lot of time. After 17 days, you either need to write them a letter saying, I'm canceling the contract, or you need to negotiate an extension on your dates. So that's a really tough deadline. 17 days is not a lot of time to get your inspection done, to get your loan contingency cleared, to review HOA documents, to review anything else that may be relevant to purchasing a home. So that date is really, really important. But once you sign the purchase agreement that's saying, hey, look, I like this home, I want to buy it subject to A, B, and C, contingency clearance, financing, and some people will put in there purchasing another home or the seller purchasing another home or something of that nature, or sale of their home, something of that nature, which can drag out the timeline. But assuming you don't have one of those contingencies, then closing can be very quick, can usually be within 30 days, and the process itself is pretty much going to happen, or you're going to be in breach after the contingencies are waived. So that's a really important deadline, that deadline to clear those contingencies after 17 days, which is why I'm saying it's very important to engage your attorney early so that you don't miss that deadline.
Sure, and just for clarification, you said once the purchase contract has been signed, was it 17 days for the due diligence and loan contingency?
That's the standard form. Like this is called the California Association of Realtors form. The standard form has 17 days in it. Okay, so once you sign, you have 17 days to close then and get. That's right. Yeah, that's definitely not a lot of time. So you're right. You're definitely better off getting in earlier, making sure everything is aligned properly and done ahead of time, so you're not scrambling at the last minute to try and make sure this loan closes and you don't miss out. Yep.
Okay, AJ. Well, I think that's all the questions I have for tonight. I guess real quick, I just wanted to just give you a second if you wanted to share, website or anything if people wanted to check you out in California and
Sure.
just where they can find you.
My website is www.gupta, G-U-P as in Peter, T as in Tom, A-L-C. That's www.guptalc.com. So feel free to check us out. Give us a call, 619-866-3444. We're pretty accessible. Happy to talk to you about any of these things and see if there's any way we can help you.
Okay, great. And you specifically you can only do closings in California yourself, correct?
Yeah, that's right. California.
Okay. But the advice is open to all.
Well,
they're all going to be similar.
They're California specific. Obviously,
right.
The 17-day closing is typically a standard form for California. The responsibilities for sellers is specific to California.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these tenancy in common issues, I know those span the country, but I know what the implications of those are in California. There's a number of things, and I will just say broad strokes. There's a lot of moving parts to one of these deals.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
There's escrow, there's title insurance, there's financing, there's fees. If you haven't been through this process, there's value in just sitting down with somebody that has.
Yeah, well, that's great, everyone. You heard it from AJ. If you need help and you're in California, he's the man to contact for sure. He's got some sound advice for us. I definitely appreciate him sharing everything with us, and I know you guys do too. If you're outside of California, then be sure to contact someone in your local state or area for specific guidelines and regulations within your state. As AJ mentioned, some things will vary from state to state. So just make sure you have everything lined up correctly in your state. But again, if you are in California, AJ will be more than happy to help you out for sure. But that is all the time we have tonight. I want to thank you again, AJ, for joining us on the show. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I know our viewers did too. You gave us a lot of excellent information about the home closing process, things to be aware of, and things that they should definitely be looking out for to save themselves for any implications in the future. So I appreciate you joining us again on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Mike. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and best of luck to you out there in California. And who knows, maybe we'll bring you back on again to discuss some more closing details in the future.
That sounds good.
Okay, AJ. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.